So you signed up for a music challenge, or maybe you just completed one and are looking back on it and wondering how you could have failed a bit more. Like, why did you succeed so well? And what could you have done differently to lower those expectations for next time? Well, that's where I come in, because as a self-proclaimed expert in overcommitting and, this is key, under-delivering at music challenges and the like, I'm here to give you some tips that'll help you maybe inject a little bit of failure and lower your expectations when you get involved in these sorts of challenges. Because who wants to be good at everything and succeed all the time? First up, of course, what are my credentials and why should you be listening to me on the subject of failing at music challenges? We really have to look no further than my trajectory at the very popular online RPM Challenge, a music challenge that happens every year in the month of February, where people from all over the world come together and try to make as much music as they can and inspire each other and have listening parties and really just push the envelope in their own creativity. As of the recording of this video, the RPM Challenge for 2025 just wrapped up. So this is all very fresh in my memory. So I'm in the perfect mindset to really teach you how to fail. So I first tried the RPM Challenge back in 2022. I was organized, dedicated, I had notes in preparation, I was inspired by the community, all these things I'll teach you not to do, don't worry. It resulted actually in the first Bay Mud release, a 10-song ambient electronic album called Escarpments, which you can find on Bandcamp. I was so excited actually, I even bought the t-shirt that year. So, way too successful. The bar was far too high, so we had to bring it down a notch next year, which we did in 2023. I only did a 6-song EP, but again, a bit too successful. I had criteria where I wanted to learn the piano more and write more lyrics, so it resulted in Lord Plunder and the Sons of No One, a supervillain crooning about the good old days.
And he may employ the third person in reference to his obvious greatness.
Still technically one of my favorite projects I've probably ever done that no one has really listened to. But again, that's too successful. We got to bring it down a couple pegs. So last year, I kind of meandered a bit more and really got into a groove of failure a bit. I ended up only making one song for the challenge that year. And it still led to an EP though, the Mental Clutter EP done on the Circuit Rhythm, which I've done videos about and is still available on Bandcamp. So it wasn't necessarily that successful in the moment for the challenge because I only did one song, but it ended up leading to a direction that I was happy with. So again, we're still on the precipice of failure here, and we really want to jump over the fence a little bit. So that takes me to the 2025 RPM Challenge that just wrapped up, like I said, and really, I meandered at this one. I was all over the place. So I ended up a new project again, Patient Whales, way more folky, me singing, which, who wants to hear that? Ended up resulting in 2 songs with a bit of a direction that I kind of want to explore going forward, but not really the marching orders I had at the end of last year even. So, and I have not bought the t-shirt. So there you go. I mean, my credentials speak for themselves. The trajectory of full album all the way down to meandering couple songs with limited direction. I hope you're inspired by my failure already. So let's move on. Now, my advice for how to really fail at these things and really get the least out of it is going to fall into 3 categories. The first of which being pre-challenge. What you do the weeks leading up to the challenge is really important for how successful you're going to be. And in this case, you really want limited prep, maybe nothing, maybe even hinder yourself in the weeks before. So let's get into how we can achieve some of that. So the first thing you're going to not want to do is create any kind of advanced templates or notes or spreadsheets, anything that'll help you stay organized that I hear a lot of people doing. You're not going to want to do that. That's going to help you too much. You really need to be flying by the seat of your pants and easily distracted if this is going to work. Also, it's super helpful if you can maybe get a new distraction or toy, a piece of gear, something that will really, really distract you right before the challenge is about to begin. In my case, I traded in the weeks before the challenge for a Sonicware Live in XFM, something that I don't even really like. I probably won't really talk about much or use that much, but it definitely distracted me to the point where I spent the nights prior to the RPM Challenge beginning going through the manual and learning this thing front to back for no real reason other than just novelty and knowing that it was distracting me from prepping for the RPM Challenge. So if you can get yourself something that'll distract you in the lead up right to a challenge you're about to join, that is amazing. And that's exactly what happened with this guy that who knows if he'll ever turn on again. And one crucial piece of pre-challenge advice that I can give for total failure is do not clean or organize your recording or studio space. If you have a home studio or somewhere that you go to normally make music or art, you got to make sure that's as uninviting as possible, and you want to be tripping over things. There'll be some B footage of the space that I'm currently sitting in because I have really succeeded in this part. I'm really proud of myself actually here. The amount of times I tripped over cables or slippers I'd left on the ground or spilled water because something was kind of leaning the wrong way. You really want to be putting yourselves in those precarious scenarios that'll distract you completely from being able to even get anything started. Now, the next grouping of advice that I'd like to give here is what you can do during the challenge to really ensure maximum obstacles and really bring that barrier to success higher and make sure that failing is more of an option. Now, this may go without saying for any of you who have failed a bunch already, and thanks for being here, supporting me in my failure. But you really want to go into any assignment or task or challenge assuming you have way more time than you actually do. Now, in the case of the RPM challenge, you have a month, and that seems like a long time. And it won't be. It will fly by, and you'll be kicking yourself by the end of the month, which is exactly where you want to be. So that first week, you kind of want to lollygag a bit, maybe just kind of assume you've got way more time and just take it slow. And if you succeeded at the pre-challenge failure checklist, then you're probably already off to a good start because you're distracted by something, your studio's a mess, and you don't have any templates or media ready. So, just assume you have way more time than you do, and that'll really help you in this failure scenario. This leads into another helpful tip, which hopefully you've seen coming if you're really in the mindset of true failure, which is you really want to wait for inspiration to come to you. You don't want to be throwing ideas at the wall and putting in the work every day when you have free time to try to see what you might want to record or make some music, because that just leads to actual creation and finished songs. You'll end up with more than you thought you would, which is not the way you want to go in terms of failure. So you really want to be sitting around just hoping for lightning to strike you and inspire a direction, because if you take any effort yourself, that's just going to lead to success, and we really can't have that. You got to be waiting for the inspiration to come to you. Speaking of inspiration, in my experience with the RPM challenge in particular, there's usually some kind of online community where you can get inspired or get support or ideas from other people and engage in what each other is creating. And you're going to want to avoid that because that's just going to make you want to make more music. And in this scenario, you need to be not inspired. Certainly, you can't be having other people build you up because you really need to be at your worst to fail the most. Let's say you're still succeeding somehow through all this adversity and actively creating new music. These next few tips hopefully will put a monkey wrench in that and get you back on track to the failure we're looking for. First up, you can recycle a piece of pre-challenge advice and get another shiny new piece of gear, because if you thought it was distracting right before the challenge began, imagine how distracting it'll be when you receive something cool in the middle of the challenge. In my case, MIDI Cake was kind enough to send me this ARP device, which I will do videos on later because it's a cool piece of hardware that will help you creatively. But in the middle of February, when I was working on some other ideas, it was perfect because I couldn't resist getting deep into the manual and videos and learning how this thing worked, even though it was not going to help me with the challenge itself because I was too far along on some ideas already, and it just made sure I was very distracted. So we'll get to that a little later though. Another piece of advice, if you're worried about things going a little too well, that may sound a little silly, which makes it perfect, is to stack your challenges. Nothing will distract you more than multiple challenges on the go at the same time. Case in point, while I was knee-deep in the RPM challenge, I decided to also commit to the Deluge preset competition, which at the time of this video may either be wrapping up or in the judging phase. You may be coming to this when it's all decided, but in any case, I have been very distracted trying to make some interesting presets to submit for that competition. So that's great. You got one challenge on top of another. But if you really want to ratchet things up a notch, you'll layer another challenge. And in that case, you actually may want to go outside the musical discipline and choose something completely different for optimal distraction. In my case, I've been doing weekly art challenges throughout the RPM challenge where there are prompts. In this case, it was Butterfly Warrior, so you can hopefully see where I went there. There's a little comic I had to do. There's 3 raccoons in a wizard's coat. How is that helping me? This is great. It's all perfect distraction stuff, making sure I barely succeed at any of them. Now, if somehow you've still been struck by the creative arrow, I don't know if there's like a little Cupid analog that hits you with creativity instead of love, but whatever. We're getting off topic, which is actually another great failure tactic. But if you have managed to persevere with some creativity through all of this, there are a couple more advanced techniques that I can give you. If you've got something that seems to be working well for you, like let's say you're trying to make an album and that first song has started to come out really well, you're going to really want to focus on that into the ground. You want to overwork that and never be happy with it and never let you move on from that one song. You might eat up the first couple weeks if you're like me in this particular challenge where you ended up making 2 songs because the first one you just obsessed over too much. So that's a really good tactic for making sure you don't produce too much. Speaking of which, you've probably heard that saying, perfect is the enemy of the good. Well, in this case, perfect is your friend because you'll never get there. Nothing will ever be perfect, but you will keep trying until you run out of time, which is great. So, maybe you want to try recording acoustic guitar for the first time in years and you forget how to set up the mics and the placement and everything, and you end up doing way too many takes and layering way too many different types of recordings of the same guitar track over and over and over. I am speaking from experience, if you can't tell in my voice, but it really helped make sure that I didn't get too much done because I was too busy trying to get that perfect sound in a perfect take through the perfect mic setup, and it just was so distracting. It was great. Hopefully those tips will really help you in the thick of a challenge for maximum distraction and minimum creative output. But much like, how the way that a doctor tells you to keep taking your medicine long after you're not sick anymore, you really got to finish that dose. You can't stop working for failure just because the challenge is over. Now you really have to continue and push further to solidify the failure that you were going for. What do I mean by that? Well, once you've submitted your tracks and the challenge is over, you're really going to want to start immediately second guessing everything. Wake up in a cold sweat wondering if the bass was loud enough, or if the resonant peaks were bothersome, or did you leave in the end too long? Or is the lyric bad that you changed 3 times? These are all the types of things that'll really help solidify the sentiment of failure in you and what you've created. And actually, here's where you also want to flip on a rule we had from prior. I told you before, don't engage in these supportive communities. But when you're second guessing yourself in these scenarios, it may drive you to seek advice or check out what other people have done. And here's where I wholeheartedly encourage you to do that, because nothing will make you feel worse about your own output than listening to all the cool stuff that other people created in the month that you had where you barely achieved anything but a song or 2 and are feeling bad already. And now you're hearing this amazing album or EP or well-produced track or whatever that someone else did, and it's just really going to pour salt all in those open wounds that you've festered over this month if you've done it right. And that brings me to what I like to call the long tail of failure, which would be maybe a good book name or album title. But the long tail of failure is where you continue to dwell on what you didn't do correctly or what didn't come out the way you wanted it to, and you stew as long as possible and really amp up the feeling of creative worthlessness that we're trying to cultivate here to make sure that failure is second to none, really. So dwell. So to recap, we've gone through some pre-challenge, during challenge, and post-challenge tips on how to achieve maximum failure. So hopefully that's helpful for you if you're either about to embark on a creative challenge and really want to achieve as little as possible, or maybe you just completed one and you're wondering how you can kind of reinforce these feelings of failure and carry them forward for as long as possible. Remember to dwell. Now, I'm sure I've missed something, and there are other tactics we could employ in the search for failure, but if what I've laid out for you today can't help you achieve that failure, and you're still creatively successful, then you may be too far gone. You may be too inspired and motivated and creative for someone like me to help. So I'm really sorry if that's the case and you're just too creatively optimistic and your output is too great. There's not much we can do for you, but you can always help the community by ignoring your friends' work and make sure they feel as bad as possible and dwell on as much as possible. So there's still something you can do in the end if none of these tips help you achieve failure. In any case, hopefully this has inspired some of you who may be on the precipice of success to take yourselves down a couple notches via my patent-pending methods to achieving abject creative failure and wallow with me. There's no shortage of challenges for you to sign up for to make yourselves feel as badly as possible about your creative output. The RPM challenge, for example, is once a year every February, but there is a monthly version where people get together still and create one new song to submit every month and have listening parties. And so there's lots of opportunities to continue your failure and spread it throughout the year. So hopefully you've got something out of this and you'll follow my journey as I continue to fail creatively in all manner of ways, and we'll share them with you here. And in the meantime, if you wanted to hear some of the music I've managed to create despite all of these techniques through the last 4 years of the RPM challenge, there will be links in the description for things like the Patient Whales project, where I just released 2 songs that are kind of indie folkish with interesting percussion and me singing, if that's going to scare you. The Mental Clutter EP by Bay Mud, one song from that was the 2024 RPM challenge, and the prior in 2023, Lord Plunder and the Sons of No One, the Supervillain Crooning project, and then way back in 2022, the first ever Bay Mud full-length ambient electronic album, Escarpments. So you can listen to those, and there'll be probably more to come because even I can only fail so much. So look forward to that. Thanks for listening to me ramble as always.